The morning was gray over Rome. Something in the air felt different. Windows stood partly open. Yet, no breeze entered the rooms. The bells in St. Peter's Square tolled. They rang earlier than usual. Inside a quiet room a man lay still. He was the most beloved figure of his faith. He made one final request. He did not ask for gold. He did not ask for speeches. He did not ask for crowds. He did not ask for words of comfort. He asked only for a reunion, a simple meeting. He wanted to see a being that did not speak, a four-legged friend, a friend who always understood him in silence. In that very instant, seconds from the final farewell, something happened. It was something that would touch the hearts of those who saw it. It is a story you are about to know. That morning in Rome, the sky was dull. The clouds did not promise a storm. But everyone in the Vatican knew something profound was about to occur. There was no chaos, no running around. Only the sound of the bells. They echoed a little slower now, as if asking for silence. Inside one of the most guarded rooms, he rested. The man who guided millions with his voice now preferred silence. He lay under light sheets. His hands were clasped together. The Holy Father did not speak much anymore. His eyes remained closed, not from absence, but from contemplation. Around him stood doctors, aides, and clergy. They watched with reverence. Every gesture was small, but each carried the weight of eternity. It was then, between one prayer and the next, that he slowly opened his eyes. He looked at a sister standing nearby. His voice was broken. "Sacred, bring Baltazar," he said. The sister froze for a second. The others looked at each other, confused. "Baltazar," a cardinal asked softly. Was he a priest, a visitor? But the Pope's gaze was clear. There was no doubt. Baltazar was a dog, the faithful four-legged companion. He had been with the Pope for years. Baltazar was a white dog, medium-sized. He had gentle eyes. His heart was immense. Baltazar no longer lived in the Vatican. When the Holy Father first fell ill, the animal was moved. He went to Castel Gandolfo. He was under the care of an older sister, Sister Dominica. She fed him. She petted him. She spoke soft words to him, like prayers, but the dog was never the same again. He didn't play. He didn't eat well. He slept beside an old cassock. Sometimes, he would let out a low howl, like someone feeling an absence they couldn't name. To understand this simple, deep request, one had to go back, far back in time, long before the Vatican, long before the crowds, the speeches, the white robes. One had to return to Argentina. When Jorge Mario was just a boy, he had rosy cheeks and curious eyes. He ran through the streets of Buenos Aires. His parents were humble. They were deeply religious. Jorge grew up hearing a phrase. He would never forget it. "Jorge, every living being carries the breath of God." With this teaching, he learned respect. He respected ants. He respected birds. He respected cats. And especially, he respected dogs. He loved stray dogs. He shared his snacks with them. He sat on the sidewalk. He petted those who feared adults. His mother used to say he once came home with dirty knees. He held a little puppy in his arms. He was trembling. "I couldn't leave him alone, Mom." In the seminary, as an adult, Jorge was known. He always fed the dogs around the convent. Even as an archbishop, he never denied affection to an abandoned animal. Faith and tenderness always walked together in his soul. So, when he became pope, he chose the name Francis. Like the saint who loved all creatures, no one was surprised. And it was no surprise either when, one day, a light-furred dog appeared. It was in the Vatican's inner garden. Inexplicably, the dog lay down at the Pope's feet, as if they already knew each other. Francis just smiled. He knelt with effort. He whispered, "Baltazar." Back in the present, the search for Baltazar became urgent. A car was sent immediately to Castel Gandolfo. Inside the vehicle, Sister Dominica held the dog. She stroked his head tenderly. "He knows, my son. He knows," she whispered to the driver. Baltazar had not been eating well lately. Now he trembled, but not from fear. His eyes were fixed on the road, as if he knew where he was going. Time seemed to race against everyone. In the Pope's room, vital signs were stable but fragile. His breathing was soft, almost like a whispered prayer. When the car arrived, Baltazar got out without hesitation. He didn't bark. He didn't pull on the leash. He just walked. Each step seemed guided by something greater. The Vatican corridors seemed to recognize his pause. Guards stepped aside. Sisters bowed their heads. Then, in front of the room's door, Baltazar stopped. No one knew what he would do. No one knew if there was still time. But in that instant, the door opened slowly. Everyone present understood something. The reunion about to happen wasn't just between a man and his dog. It was between two souls. Souls that had walked side by side. Perhaps they were created for this very moment. Altazar walked as if he knew. His pace was calm but firm. There was no agitation. There was no fear. The corridors of the sacred Vatican seemed to recognize the sound of his pause. It felt as if time had shifted. It moved at a different frequency, slower, more solemn. A dog walked among Swiss guards. He carried himself with such dignity. It almost seemed he wore an invisible cassock too. He reached the door and stopped, not out of fear. He paused as if asking permission, as if understanding something sacred was happening inside. Sister Dominiker's hands trembled as she touched the doorknob. She looked at one of the guards. He gave a slight nod of approval, and then the door opened. Inside, everything was silent. Light filtered through a white curtain. The Pope lay still. His eyes were closed, his head tilted slightly to one side. His fingers rested on his chest. His face exuded peace. Baltazar did not bark. He did not run. He simply entered. The eyes of everyone present focused on the animal. It was as if they had momentarily forgotten a dog was there. There was something larger, something ancient, something spiritual. Altazar approached the bed. He stopped beside it. He looked at the Pope's face. Then he sat down. He remained there, motionless. His ears drooped slightly. His eyes fixed on the man he loved so much. He seemed to be waiting for a sign, a word, a sigh, but nothing happened. A nurse discreetly wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. One of the cardinals quietly stepped back. He couldn't contain his emotion. Everything was so simple, yet, at the same time, so profound. Minutes passed. Baltazar did not move. He was like a sentinel, a guardian of love. Slowly, the Pope moved his fingers, an almost imperceptible gesture, like someone trying to reach something just out of grasp. But he did not open his eyes. Baltazar noticed. He leaned forward. He lay down beside the bed. He rested his muzzle on the sheet. Very close to the Pope's hand, there was still no contact. But the gesture was enough. It felt as if, in the unseen world of pure feelings, an embrace had occurred. Sister Dominiker withdrew. She knew this was not her moment to be witnessed. It was to be felt from a distance. Outside, the sun began to set behind the basilica's dome. The sky turned golden orange. Rome, indifferent to this intimate moment, continued its hurried pace. But inside that room, time had stopped. Baltazar closed his eyes. The Pope breathed shallowly, almost imperceptibly. No sound, no words, only the sound of time breathing. Then, something almost invisible happened. The Pope opened his eyes for a brief moment. He said nothing, but his lips moved. No one there knew for sure what he whispered. Baltazar lifted his head. He looked at the Pope's face. He tilted his body slightly. He moved closer carefully, as if the fragility of the moment could shatter with any sudden movement. But there was no kiss, no contact yet. Only closeness, presence, absolute respect. In the adjoining room, the Pope's personal secretary received messages. They came from all over the world. Empresses, religious leaders, politicians, the faithful, all asking about the pontiff's health. But no one knew what was happening at that exact moment. A dog, a room, a man suspended between earth and sky. Meanwhile, a persistent memory returned to Baltazar's mind. If dogs truly remember as we do, perhaps they remember with their bodies, with smell, with their souls. He remembered Francis's quick steps through the garden, the low voice full of pauses, the calloused hands that knew how to bless and caress with the same tenderness. He remembered afternoons sitting together. Under the shade of an olive tree, the Pope would simply watch him, like someone thanking God for seeing the beauty of simplicity. And now he was there, steadfast, loyal, present. Time passed. The lights in the room were dimmed. Baltazar did not move. For hours, he remained there, a four-legged sentinel, an angel with white fur. And so, that night, people began to realize something was happening. The Pope no longer responded to calls. His soul was slowly withdrawing. In the Vatican courtyard, footsteps echoed emptily. A light breeze made the bells chime high in the tower. Some of the faithful, without knowing exactly why, began lighting candles. They placed them before the image of Saint Francis. A solemn calm filled the air. Inside the room, Baltazar finally lay down beside the bed. There was still no farewell, but the silence grew heavier with meaning. Night fell completely. Francis lay still. Baltazar remained awake. The world seemed suspended. The Vatican did not sleep that night. Lights stayed on, soft, like invisible candles scattered through the corridors. Footsteps were careful. Whispers were contained. Prayers were made with closed eyes and open hearts. It was as if everyone knew, without needing words, that an era was closing. In the Pope's room, the atmosphere was reverent. Baltazar did not leave the bedside. He had chosen a spot on the left side. His body touched the cold marble floor, but his muzzle rested on the white sheet. He breathed calmly, as if listening to the heart rhythm of the man who gave him his name and his home. The Pope did not speak. His eyes remained closed, sometimes a slight twitch in his fingers, sometimes a sigh heavy with memories. It was as if he were already navigating between two worlds, suspended between the now and the eternal. He was no longer just a man. He was a presence, a living history reaching its final point, before becoming eternal memory. Hours earlier, a letter had arrived at the Vatican. It came from the Franciscan community in Assisi. A short message, written by hand. If Francis departs tonight, we know he will be among the birds, the dogs, the trees, and all those he knew how to love with tender eyes. He will be remembered as one who not only spoke of God but saw him in every creature. The letter was read softly by an aide. Strangely, Baltazar lifted his head at the end of the reading. He stayed motionless, as if he understood, as if he had been waiting for those words. In the next room, two nuns prepared a bouquet, olive branches and white flowers. The choice wasn't aesthetic. It was symbolic. The olive branch represented peace. It also represented the promise of life after the flood, the faith that a new beginning would always come. But for the dog, there were no symbols, only the absence of sound, and the presence of something invisible, something he seemed to feel with every hair on his body. Outside, the night sky began to break with bluish tones. It was still dawn, but the first timid rays of sunrise gently pushed back the darkness. The world seemed to be preparing itself, modestly, for what was to come. Baltazar remained lying down. Once, he stood up slowly. He walked around the bed. He sniffed the Pope's pillow. Then he returned to his spot. No noise, no bark. He was the guardian. Meanwhile, in Buenos Aires, where it all began, an elderly woman lit a candle. She placed it before an image of Saint Francis. She didn't know exactly why, but she felt something in her chest. "He is leaving," she said simply. A tear fell slowly. Someone entered the room. It was a young priest, newly arrived from Latin America. He had met the Pope personally a few months earlier. He approached slowly. He knelt in a corner of the room. He prayed in silence. Baltazar turned his head towards him. He watched him for long seconds. Then he turned his eyes back to the bed. The priest would later write, "I never saw a dog look with such depth." It was as if he already knew what no one could say, and still he remained there, silent, waiting. The dawn progressed. Outside, some faithful began to gather in prayer. A spontaneous chain of faith formed, little by little, candles lit, rosaries between fingers, words murmured against the wind. There was no official announcement, but love gives notice beforehand. Inside the room, the Pope's breathing was faint, rhythmic. His eyes did not open again, but he still seemed to listen. He seemed present, though distant. Baltazar stood up again. He took 2 steps forward. He rested his muzzle on the Pope's right hand. The hand rested on his chest. He stayed there, still. Time seemed frozen. At this gesture, one of the aides brought a hand to his mouth, stifling a sob, but no one dared move. In that moment, silence spoke more than any prayer. It was a full silence, heavy with tears that did not fall but burned in the chest. Baltazar lay down one last time, closer now, his body pressed against the sheet. He closed his eyes. He did not move again. Outside, the first rays of sun touched the top of St. Peter's Basilica dome. The sky was clear, the breeze was soft. Rome seemed to have paused for a few moments. unaware that in that precise second something sacred was about to happen. The sun had already risen when the bells began to ring. It wasn't an alarm, not a hurried call. It was a serene, continuous tolling. It sounded like a prayer made of bronze. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica announced that time had changed. The Pope's room was calm. Soft light entered through the open curtains. It illuminated the white sheet and Francis's serene face. He was gone. He had departed in peace. There was no struggle, no dramatic last breath, just a slight relaxing of the fingers, a profound silence, and the certainty that, in that moment, a soul had returned home. But he did not go alone. Baltazar was there, lying beside the bed, his muzzle still touching the cloth. It was only when the bells began to ring that he stood up. No one called him, no one taught him what to do, but the dog took 2 steps to the center of the room. He looked around, then he lay down. His body faced the window, as if keeping watch, as if telling the world, "I stay here until he is at peace." Shortly after, the Pope's body was prepared, dressed simply as he always wished. In his hand, a small wooden rosary, a gift from an African child during one of the Vatican audiences. Meanwhile, Baltazar was taken to an inner garden. He wasn't agitated. He didn't cry. He just sat, looking at the sky. His chest rose and fell slowly. When someone tried to call him, he simply looked, then turned his eyes upward again. The world then knew. The news spread like wind. "Pope Francis dies this morning," reported the Vatican. Crowds began to form. People cried. They prayed. They sang. Some carried flowers. Others brought only silence, but there was a deep, different kind of commotion, something spiritual, inexplicable, as if the world had lost a father or a friend. The news traveled the globe like a silent wave of grief and longing. "Pope Francis passed away this morning." The headlines read. It wasn't just news, it was an emptiness. That night, St. Peter's Square began to fill. Even without an official announcement, faithful from all over the world started arriving. As if guided by an inner call no one could explain, candles were lit, photos were placed, letters were left, and among all the images, one began to repeat spontaneously. Saint Francis of Assisi surrounded by animals. It was as if the people were saying, "He is gone, but he left us love for all creation." Cameras focused on hands holding rosaries, on tearful eyes, on slow, respectful gestures. There was no chaos, no desperation. There was silence. And amidst that silence, Baltazar, the faithful dog who spent the last hours beside the Pope, remained quiet. He was in one of the inner gardens. He didn't eat. He didn't play. He just looked at the sky, like someone waiting for a sign. Some visitors reported seeing him walk to the Vatican's iron gates. He stopped in front of the crowd. He lay down there, head lowered. He faced the basilica. Without anyone saying a word, people stepped aside. They made space. The world seemed to understand. There was no coffin, no altar there, but there was a gesture of love, respect, and fidelity. In Buenos Aires, in the neighborhood where Jorge Mario Bigaglio grew up, a woman placed flowers on the sidewalk, where he used to play as a child. She murmured, "He always loved dogs." And now one of them stayed to tell the story for us. Newspapers, live broadcasts, social media. Images of Baltazar spread. He became a symbol of love that transcends words. Altazar, the friend who stayed until the end. The most moving silence in history. The final gesture of a pope who believed in limitless love. In Manila, Lisbon, Bogotá, Rome, Maputo, Santiago, Quebec, people lit candles with photos of Francis and animals. Others held their own pets with extra tenderness that night. The world wasn't just saying goodbye to a pope. It was bidding farewell to a soul who taught, with gestures and words, that loving means looking even at the smallest beings with reverence. In the early morning hours, something curious happened. A white dove, appearing from nowhere, landed on the windowsill of the room where Baltazar slept. The dog, who was lying down, slowly lifted his head. He looked at the bird, then he looked at the sky. They stayed like that for a while, motionless, silent. A nun watching from afar whispered, "I think he understood. I think he knew." The next morning, the photo of the dove and the dog circled the globe. A phrase began to circulate in many languages. Francis's last blessing came in the form of silence and pause. Today, Baltazar lives in retirement. He is in a convent in the Italian countryside. The sisters say he is quiet but very sweet. He sleeps beside an old cassock. Sometimes he gets up in the middle of the night. He simply looks at the sky, perhaps waiting for the sound of a voice, perhaps recognizing the presence of the one who never abandoned him. Pope Francis left many lessons for humanity. He spoke about compassion, justice, humility. He taught about faith, forgiveness, hope. But one of the most beautiful lessons was this: the love for animals, the respect for every living being, the understanding that every creature carries the breath of God, and that animals, even without words, love with more purity than many human hearts. That is sacred. Francis showed that no creature is too small to deserve love. He showed that a dog can be more faithful than 1,000 speeches, more true than 1,000 sermons. He taught us not just with words, but with his heart. Remember this: animals are part of divine creation. They feel, they suffer, they love, and sometimes they see God before we do. They are blessed creatures. They have souls, feelings, and the capacity for unconditional love. This story touched hearts around the world. It is a reminder of the sacred bond we can share, a reminder of love in its purest form, a testament to a simple man, a faithful dog, and a love that echoed into eternity.